IICA, the home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas. I would like to greet you and warmly welcome you to the technical launch of the Hemispheric Initiative for Water and Agriculture. Special greetings to the Director General of IICA, Dr. Manuel Otero, the coordinator of the initiative, Dr. Fulbright Taylor, all the project committee, the technical cooperations, the chief of staff, corporate services, and all colleagues. Virtually, we have the Minister of Agriculture of Chile, who has some comments, remarks, Esteban Valenzuela Vanderek, the Minister of the Government of El Salvador, Oscar Enrique Guardado Calderón, Minister of the Republic of El Salvador, representing Hyderabad. I would like to greet Dr. Fernando Mirales, who is with us, Dean and Professor at George Mason University, Virginia. Mr. Christopher Nell, Director of Research at the Water Institute for Food at the University of Nebraska. Ms. Rayen Quiroga, Head of the Water and Energy Division and of the Natural Resource Division of ECLAC. Mr. Luis Lecunas Noyola, Senior Specialist in Irrigation and Drainage, World Bank. Mr. Lucio Javier Garcia, Financial Institutional Specialist of the Water and Sanitation Division of IDB. Ms. Paula Roberts, Specialist in Infrastructure and Energy Sector of the Water and Sanitation Division at IDB. And Dr. Franz Rojas, Director of Water and Sanitation at CAF. Thank you for having accepted our invitation to be important partners in this initiative. I will also be the moderator today for this launch. My name is Fernando Schwanke, Forestry Engineer, Project Director here at IICA. I will also introduce the Water and Agriculture Initiative. But first of all, I would like to offer the floor to Mr. Manuel Otero, Director General of IICA, for the official opening remarks for this opening or this lunch. Thank you, Fernando. Good morning to all of you. It is truly an honor to be participating in the technical launch of this Water and Agriculture Initiative, and particularly to know that we have such a strategic importance as is the Water for Food Institute, Nebraska University, ECLAC, IDP, World Bank, and others, to know that we have two ministers from key countries as Chile through its Minister Esteban Valenzuela and El Salvador through Minister Oscar Guardado. Well, I believe that the cooperation strategies in this new age has to have these characteristics. These have to be multi-country, and precisely because water knows no borders. It has to be multi-stakeholder, not only actor, but also international organizations, civil society organizations. There's no room here for differences. The problem is so serious, so severe, that it calls upon us all to commit ourselves, for us to all to participate, and I would say to create a new water culture. I always say that when I started my career as professional in technical cooperation at IICA, late in the late 1980s, and I'm aging myself with this. There were many engineers specialized in water resources. Well, I don't know if there were many, but there were some. That has been lost today, and it's a paradox because we need them. We need knowledge-intensive agriculture. We need to address the sustainable intensification of agriculture, where water, we have to be aware, is an extremely finite resource that we need in agriculture. Our farmers and producers compete against its use with other human beings. So in times of crisis and climate change. As the Secretary General of the United Nations recently said, it is too serious, extremely serious. Agriculture is in a period of transition, and I can say so knowingly due to what is happening in the Americas. Many of these things have been very positive, but at the same time, we have a water transition that we need to support, where we need to come up with proposals for, because evidently the regulatory frameworks in many cases are obsolete because water use efficiency is not the correct, because there are no interministerial actions of weight, because there is no new generation of engineers or of specialists in water matters. And I would dare say that the diagnostic is not difficult to list the number of causes that prevent us from moving forward faster and stronger in water, as this is how to do it. And we have to think of how to do it. This requires a lot of political will, a lot of funding, and allow me to repeat, interinstitutional approach and effort. Allow me to mention to the colleagues that are with us that we are a few hours away of a ministerial conference that will take place here at the headquarters of the IICA in Costa Rica. And to my surprise, and I am very pleasantly surprised, we would have the participation of three presidents of the republic, with the participation in deliberations of a Nobel Prize laureate in economy, a World Food Prize, that we will have the CEO of the World Prize of Food, the Minister of the Environment, of the United Arab Emirates. And that is not because this is important, just agriculture as a whole is important. We need to discuss where agriculture is headed, driven by these changes and by these pressing demands to generate more food, but producing in a more responsible manner, and where water is assigned an essential responsibility. I always like to say that IICA, with the political willingness as has been expressed by our decision-making bodies in recent meetings, we have to go from discourse to action, and this can only be done in coordination, sharing with other international organizations related to technical cooperation, financing, and always ratifying the political willingness of the countries in the sense that this is something extremely important. That is why I am so happy today. I am willing to listen to you, to closely follow what is said, but particularly what we may agree to advance together in something that is fundamental for the future of our countries. The drought in Argentina, my own country, I experienced it, and as well as the drought in Paraguay that affected 30% of the grain harvest, and the water supply problems in Uruguay. I've monitored that club closely. Cases are ever more frequent, ever more intense, and this calls for smart actions and decisive actions. Due to all of this, I am very proud to have in this team, to have Fernando Schwanke, Ernesto Espinosa, and all this, Mr. Taylor, and the specialists in the different offices, knowing particularly that we are developing and hopefully consolidating a strategic partnership so that we can all together can help the countries and producers and rurality, that new rurality that is under development, to have a better future, and that I am sure we all deserve. Well, anyway, thank you very much, and I return the floor to Fernando. Thank you, Dr. Manuel Otero. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your leadership in Latin America and the Caribbean. for having brought such an important subject matter as the contribution of agriculture in face of water crisis. Without water, there is no food security. Remember this. We are broadcasting this session. We are streaming this on Facebook and YouTube. And in our session, we have more than 217 participants of 34 member countries of IICA, technical experts of ministries of agriculture, water agencies from our offices in other countries, and we thank you all for being present. Well, allow me now to offer the floor to the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of the government of El Salvador, His Excellency Oscar Enrique Guardado Calderon, who has some remarks, but he has no camera, no video, so he would just speak. So, Mr. Calderon, go ahead. Thank you for your participation.
Ya. Buenos días,
Good morning,
excelentísimo señor
Your Honorable
Director
Director General,
Manuel Otero,
Director of IICA, Manuel Otero, Fernando Schwab, from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, representatives of the World Bank, ECLAC, IDB, CAF, and other international organizations involved in the Hemispheric Initiative, Water and Agriculture. Dear participants from all ministries, from the hemisphere, and authorities from the agriculture sector, as well as other institutions related to water resources. El Salvador, as pro tempore chair of the Central American Agricultural Council and Minister of Agriculture of Livestock, Agriculture and Livestock of El Salvador, and we lost the audio. I apologize. We thank you for the initiative of organizing this space for dialogue, high-level dialogue that will allow us to work in a strategic direction for sustainable production of food products, water, and agriculture. Central American countries, but particularly, we lost the audio. We have lost the audio.
Centroamericanos como la sequía extrema.
We see extreme drought, flooding caused by storms and hurricanes. All of these weather phenomena have an impact on the means of living and production. The production of food products, the development of livestock and water quality of the highly vulnerable population. These phenomena produce not only economic damage, but also affect the ecosystems, a loss of biodiversity, poverty, and migration, among other economic and social impacts. And we lost the audio again.
El fenómeno este 2023 y continuará el 2024.
This is a phenomenon in 2023 and will continue in 24. We see variation in precipitation. And we have the drought. We lost the audio fully, sorry. We have communication problems, Mr. Minister.
De la dieta alimentaria de nuestros pueblos, en favor de las familias
in favor of families and water resource management, which is not only up for the agriculture sector. In this sense, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock of El Salvador and the pro tempore chair of the Central American Agricultural Council. We lost the audio again.
Instituto Interamericano General,
the Director General of the IICA, Dr. Manuel Lutero, for organizing such an exchange to help us understand the strategic actions and opportunities that may contribute to build national and regional agendas for the intervention in water for agriculture. To reduce the weather effects on food security, the objective of this initiative on water and agriculture is to increase knowledge and opportunities to manage water resources for sustainable agriculture in scenarios of shortage. No audio. We have the audio problems, Mr. Minister. Perhaps we can move to the Minister of Chile while we correct the situation. Yes, unfortunately, we have connection problems with Minister Oscar Calderon, but we thank the Minister for being willing to participate in the launch and to highlight the importance of this subject matter for countries, for agriculture, particularly here in Central America, where we have the Central American Dry Corridor. We would like to thank Minister Oscar Calderon for his participation, for his commitment in water matters. We have received a message from the Minister of Chile, a benchmark in water. Esteban Valenzuela is currently in Spain, but he has sent a video talking about the water initiative. So let us listen to the Minister of Chile, Esteban Valenzuela. Wearing my water t-shirt, I am in Santiago de Chile. For the enactment of the Irrigation Water Day. After many years of discussion, we have reached an agreement for this irrigation water treatment agreement that focuses on responsible use of water and technification. I would like to talk about Latin America and the Caribbean, which is fundamental. We continue with the structural drought, many areas of concern in the area of Coquimbo, and we see the co-responsibility of this. We have the possibility of working with IICA, where with rice and many other species, we can have applied technology at this time of adaptation and mitigation. Thank you, Minister Valenzuela, Esteban Valenzuela, for your message, which has been sent from Spain, and the commitment of Chile with the initiative, the National Irrigation Commission, and with the courses offered to disseminate throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like to thank the two ministers. Let us now begin with the presentations scheduled for today, beginning with the Water and Agriculture Initiative, which we have been building from the beginning of the year, and I would like to quickly present to each one of you. The Water and Agriculture Initiative has as an objective to contribute to agriculture in face of the water crisis that the Director General mentioned and that we started this year. Next slide, please. The objective is to consolidate capacities and foster strategic public-private partnerships.
De los países miembros para mejorar la gestión integrada y eficiente en el uso de agua para la agricultura.
We have the public-private partnerships supporting ministries of agriculture and all other organizations. There are two key words here, which are public-private partnerships, and that is why our partners are so important in this initiative. IICA has a track record in the area of water. Ever since 2010 to 2022, we covered more than 70 actions in technical cooperation, water for agriculture in all regions of the Americas. I would like to thank ECLAC, IDB, CAF, the World Bank, and the Water Institute, the Water for Food Institute for partnering in this effort, because we believe that our strengths are stronger when we work together. Why is this initiative important? Well, without water, there is no agriculture, and with no agriculture, there is no food security. So we urgently need a joint continental action that improves integrated management and efficient use of water for agriculture. And the leadership of IICA and of the Director General with joint actions of our ministries and ministers is truly important for this in this area. So we have concluded that besides producing food products, the agriculture must be a great producer of water, storing it, using it efficiently through innovative technologies. Agriculture must be part of the water crisis solution, and we fully believe in that. The lines of the action are four. The first line is production and storage of water by strengthening capacities in different countries to design and implement plans, programs, and projects for the production and storage of water for agriculture. Through the integrated water resource management in water basins, nature-based solutions, and good agricultural practices. And here we are talking about the recovery of degraded soils, direct planting, good agricultural practices, natural storage of water in soils, the recovery of forests, protection of basins, artificial storage of water, of course, planning and sustainable use, and recovery of forests, the water funds, who pays for the water. There's a big discussion in that area. And smart, climatically smart agriculture. We are working in some systems in digital resources available to diagnose the occurrence and reduce the impacts in Latin America and the Caribbean. So nature-based solutions here and the importance that agriculture has in this subject matter for the production and storage of water. As the director said, we are the biggest users of water in the world, and we have to look at the efficiency in water usage, improve efficiency in the use of water for agriculture purposes through technological innovation, dissemination, application of innovation, and the capture, storage, distribution, and irrigation, and intensification of crops that are resistant to water stress.
The third axis of the initiative is the governance. It's to strengthen the mechanisms, the tools, capacities associated to the governance of the water for agriculture by the ministries and institutions that are guiding the directors of water, guiding frameworks, public policies for the funds of water. And here the governance is a condition for the design and the application of effective policies. Here we have CEPAL that has a great experience in governance, the bid with the matters related to the water funds, and we have to really strengthen this in the countries. And the fourth axis is the impulse on investments. to promote investments, and we need money to put this project into operation to improve the planning, this allocation, and public-private articulation of the pre-inversion resources and the investment in the countries. The Axis has as its objective to contribute to increased initiative, programs, and projects in the integrated management and efficient use of the water for agriculture. And here we really thank the participation of the BID, of the World Bank, which are really very important in the matter of investments in the country. And as initial contribution of the IICA to this initiative, we are launching today a website for the initiative of water and agriculture, and we're going to put the link of the website on the share. Here we are live on the transmission, and within that link, we have a space that we call the hub of knowledge. This hub of knowledge has, at this moment, four axes. The first axis is for public policy, where we build in this hub of knowledge all the institutional frameworks from the institutions of the countries. And here, why is this? Because we believe that the other countries that should have access to all the legal frameworks of what is happening in the countries. We have countries that are more advanced, others that are not that much advanced. And I think that beginning with our action, along with the Ministries of Agriculture, we might be able to disseminate the good practices also of regulatory frameworks and institutional frameworks. And in each one of these countries, we have a chapter for the institutional framework that are precisely the institutions that work with the issues related to water and the laws and regulations that might exist in matters related to water and agriculture. The second axis of the hub of knowledge is the construction of an atlas of technology. This atlas of technology now has 70 technologies, good technological practices in the use of water and the identification and hydric information. And this is going to be an open atlas of information where we are going to put in this space all the technologies that might be innovative in matters related to water so that the countries might also have access, the ministries of agriculture, the private sector, it might have access to good practices in the use of water, and that the directories of who has that technology so that they can look for the technologies and implement them in their countries. This is something that is also available, and it's going to be open so that we might be able to complement this every month with other technologies that are still not included within this atlas of technologies within the hub of knowledge. The third axis is the axis of publications. So we also want to connect the publications that exist in the matter related to water, and we know that our partners have many publications, excellent publications, and we also want to access them. And here, to begin with, we have put the publications that the ICA already has in the matters related to water. And we have many publications done. And based on these technical cooperation projects and the 70 projects that we have, and others where we have narratives of very interesting experiences. And we want to today, for the first time, to launch the last publication. That is a publication that is titled Innovations of the Water in of the Management of Water in Agriculture, Experiences and Opportunities in Latin America, written by Dr. Carlos Pamareda, who has been a consultant for the ICA. And here we have very good information regarding water and agriculture. And I would also like to thank the work and the effort of Dr. Diego Montenegro, who also worked on this publication. And this publication is already ready to download in the website, which we are also going to put the website in the chat so that anybody who wants it might be able to download this publication and be able to read it. And it is very interesting. It's a very important and significant contribution by these doctors. And also, And finally, we want to potentiate the information services of the International Alliance for Information, Agricultural and Livestock Information that the ICA has been coordinating for many years now, and where we have an investment of millions of dollars already. And as I always say, this is the Google of agriculture, of the agricultural informations. And we believe within the CIDALC, the Alliance for the Agro Information Services, a special chapter for water and agriculture, where we already have there 240,000 publications, information, and issues that can be downloaded very easily and freely. So these four axes within the Hub of Knowledge are our contribution on behalf of the ICA for the initiative of water and agriculture so that the people might be able to access them and be able to consult. Here, we have the direction, the URL of the web page, and the QR code that you can access also. But also here on the screen that is moving, we have the QR code, and this takes us immediately to the web page of the initiative. And to start wrapping up, the follow-up, we are always going to try to potentiate and to launch the efforts of the countries and of the partners. The entrance gate to the initiative is through our representations in the countries. This is a process that is a continuous improvement process that is fed from our experiences, and the contact and the informations might be sent directly through the email water or agua dot agricultura at icaputo.inc. So thank you very much for your attention. This is very quickly what we want to do with the initiative of water and agriculture. And to continue on, we are now going to give, we're going to see the production and storage of water and production and management of hydrographic basins with Dr. Fernando Miralles, sorry, talking about the bid and the tools that the bid has available for the management of the basins. So thank you very much, Dr. Fernando Miralles. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Fernando. We are very appreciative with ICA for the kind invitation. We also thank my colleagues of the BID, of the Inter-American Development Bank, because we have been cooperating on this topic for a long time now. So I want to talk very briefly today about the HydroBid system, which is a system of hydrology and climate in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is a regional model of simulation. This model was something that we created in the Inter-American Development Bank when I was a specialist more than a decade ago. And it has basically a system of information, hydrologic information, and apart from that, a progressive simulation model for all the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's an open access system that is available through the BID. But I want to make a little overview of what the system is all about. Yes, yes, and this is something that covers all the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, all the basins and all. Any drop of water that comes in rainfall and drains through the Latin American and Caribbean region. And something to make a little joke about this, when I present this map the first time, it was in a conference in Mexico. And Mexicans loved it that the map of Latin America was almost going all the way into the southwest of the United States. And the reason why is that a blue spot that you see going up into the United States exists is because if a drop of water falls in that territory, that drop of water eventually, by the hydrological process, will drain to the Latin American and Caribbean region coming in through Mexico. But basically, the system is the systems, that blue spot that you see there is a series of small polygons, 230,000 small micro basins. The average size of those basins is 80 square kilometers, a dimension of length and kilometers. So in the panel on the left, you have the whole region of Latin America and the Caribbean. In the superior top panel, you have sort of like a zoom into the area of the Caribbean, and And in the panel at the bottom, you have the smallest country, which is Barbados, which is served by the Inter-American Development Bank, which is 400 square kilometers. And if you see the figure, there are 5 polygons within Barbados. This gives you the scale and the idea of the spatial scale. But the importance about HydroBid, it is that it's a hydrological a platform that allows us to make a progressive simulations in any part of Latin America and the Caribbean with a system of parameters that is consistent and integrated. You don't have to simulate the whole region of Latin America and the Caribbean. You can simulate any small part. And here we have an example, for example, of the Amazon region, where we can see the whole of the Amazon region. And this is one of the studies that we're carrying out currently, but it can also be, you can simulate a small part of that basin, or you can just simulate an even smaller part of that. If you make a very detailed zoom to the geographic information system, you can see the basins, drawn on the maps, and also the course that they follow. Imagine having a system that allows you to look not only and analyze the availability and the management of the hydric resources or the water resources in any part of the region, but also to make a progressive analysis. For example, with under the influence of changing the structures, like for example, climate change. So to give you an idea of the system, the ecosystems has basically two parts. It has an analytic database where we have all the parameters, the topography and everything, all the data of rainfall that might exist that is stored. And the second part is a model of simulation. So obviously that platform, what it intends to say is that we are developing additional modules that are can be attached to this platform. For example, the BID is working on a new model that is already prepared, which is HydroBid Flood, which is to analyze floodings. And this is a platform that is going to attach to this existing platform. So the platform, the hydrological platform, is based on hydrological parameters. It is a public database. It can be requested just like the whole of the system. And apart from that database, the second component, which is a hydrological model, which is a model that talks about rainfall and water shedding and low functions and runoff. And it's a model that allows us to estimate the transitory runoffs of water, and they're going to follow them in each one of those 230,000 microbasins. So that attached to the database and attached to some of the modules that have been developed, for example, a module, for example, of a model for assimilation of data of climate models. And now HydroBid has the capacity of taking data generated by climate models, global climatic models, particularly from the ones that are used by the Intergovernmental Climate Change Panel. And this is a model from the ISIMP 3B, which is basically the combination of 20-something global climate models that simulate prospective changes in the climate and prospective changes in the physiological matters globally. And so we have developed a methodology to be able to assimilate data from the climate models and to be able to incorporate it. And I'm going to give you an example that we're working on right now regarding the Amazon basin. It's a very important basin, not only for the Latin American and Caribbean region, but also for the world. It's the biggest reservoir of biodiversity. It's one of the most important reservoirs globally of sweet water, drinking water. One of the biggest reservoirs of biological circulation. So, with the sponsorship of the bank and the sponsorship of the organization, Amazonic Organization for Development, that we're working on for the development of the Amazon basin. Here we have the map of the basin. The red dots are where we have flow data to be able to calibrate the model. And it is a project that is currently underway. It is 8 countries of the region that make up the basins. It's a very important project, not only for the region, but also for the world, as I was just stating. And well, to give you an idea of the type of result that we might have, that is generated by HydroBid, we have 3 maps. The map on the left is numeric a grid of the global circulation model. The intermediate map is the translation or the downscaling of this climate change to the grid that we already have to the numeric grid of hydrogrid. And this is how we can add on the right map. We can see how we can add this to the existing basins so that we might have data to be able to calibrate this. It is a very big basin. It's almost 7 million square kilometers, 8 countries, and so forth. So the main data is to understand what are the impacts from different scenarios of climate change that are being projected by the panel, by the intergovernmental panel. And we made several simulations, and this is a product that is already available through the bank. And basically, to simplify the idea, what we have seen is that for any of the four scenarios, the big scenarios that are simulated by the panel, the superficial runoff in the basin is going to be reduced. Even in the least severe scenario, this is the CCSSP 126, which is the most benign climate change scenario, and to the most severe and the more accentuated is the climate change, the greatest is the reduction of the flow. And we see reductions of the flow depending on the month and depending on the scenario of up to even 20% of the reduction of the flow in some of the cases. And reductions as small as maybe 1 or 2% in the flow. So these are the type of results that we can generate. And I have given you the example of the Amazon basin as a flag for the region and for the bank, but not necessarily we have to simulate 1 million square kilometers basin. We have worked on parts. We have smaller basins, and there's a map of the countries in which with which we have interacted. This is a center for support of hydro grid that is supported by the bank and where we have technical support. We have worked on almost all of the countries, and we have some examples. We have worked with hydrobid in the last 10 years, accumulatively in all the countries of the region. In Costa Rica, we have some examples with working with some of the institutions and also throughout the whole region. This is in Central America. Here we have the example of Costa Rica. We have worked with the National Directory of Water and the Costa Rican Institute of Electricity, but obviously there is a whole example that spreads out throughout the whole of Central America. This is the Caribbean. We have worked in many projects in some of the Andean countries. And here we have the agencies with which the bank has worked one way or another. And this is in the Southern Cone. So there is an accumulated experience of approximately a decade already working with the system. And I can tell you that, for example, in the case of Peru, Peru has an hydrogrid nationwide, and it covers the whole of the country with the capacity of simulation. We have worked in Peru with the National Authority of Water, and there are the typical applications that can be seen apart from analyzing the climate change, the impact on infrastructure, new or existing infrastructure, making a pre-post, simulating scenarios of distribution of water, for example, which might be very interesting in the case of agriculture, to dimension basins for irrigation, also for application in the agriculture, the electrical part, the storage for hydroelectric projects. In the case of irrigation, early warning systems, the design of monitoring systems and so forth. So it's a system that is very flexible. The bank is using recently to make a lot of hydric security studies, and that is something that is very relevant for the agriculture. And to be brief, the system has a broad range of publications, videos. If you make the search in Google through Hydrobid, you're going to find a lot of material, but we have it consolidated in a web site that is hydrobidlac.org, and I leave it at your disposition. That's what I wanted to present to you, and I can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you for the opportunity and for any questions you might have. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fernando. It was really very, very interesting. Very short, but very interesting. And I believe that this is the objective of the technical launch, to be able to put into knowledge and information to all of all the people that participate, so that they might be able to know what are the tools that are available in the matter of planning for water. So thank you very much, Fernando, Dr. Fernando. And now I invite the participants, if you have any question that you want to, you can send that via the chat and we can do the answers individually later on. And before going on to Christopher Neale, I'm going to go back with the Minister of Agriculture of El Salvador, Mr. Oscar Calderon, so that he might be able to finalize his presentation, which was interrupted because of the matter related to connection. So, Minister Calderon, please, the floor is yours. Yes, good morning. Once again, good morning to all of you, Manuel and everybody, all those who are participating in this Zoom conference. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you now better. Thank you. Okay. First of all, I would like to present my apologies because I'm coming from a trip to the Republic of Belize and I am on my way to El Salvador. But I have listened to very carefully the presentations by other colleagues, and the important thing about this is that if we know the challenges, the difficulties, and everything that is happening currently in our planet, and especially in this region, it is important also to point out that today, more than ever, it is necessary and almost mandatory for us to put all of our goodwill into work, the administrative practices for public management, so that we might be able to jointly carry out, along with the experiences of other countries and the ones that we are developing ourselves. It is more than interesting and undeniable that we have to standardize some of the concepts, that we have to make public policies regarding this topic, that we might be able to, in any case, and in my quality of Minister of El Salvador of Agriculture and Livestock, and the pro tempore president of the Central American uh, uh, Council, we make the proposals to present efforts. And it is in that sense that we, all of us, have to put together an agenda that will contribute to the development of this very fundamental and priority issue, because we know, sorry, he broke up. Once again, the communication fell. I think that once again the connection is not working, so we are going to continue and going to go on with Dr. Christopher Niale, who is the Director of Investigation of the Institute of Water for Food of the University of Nebraska, so that he might make his presentation. So, Professor Christopher, please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, the IICA, for the invitation of participating and presenting today, and to confuse the interpretation and the translation, I'm going to talk in English because my presentation and my slides are in English.
All right, so let me share my screen. Do you see the presentation? Hello? Yes,
Sí, sí.
yeah.
In Yes.
full screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So thank you. I was asked to talk a little bit about the Institute and some of the activities and give you an idea of Nebraska as an example of high production agriculture and governance of water that's works. So I will be doing the presentation in this order. That's describing the Institute, talk about the governance, some of the products that we've developed that are relevant for Latin America, and drought monitoring, our partners in the center, and some other activities. So our institute was formed in 2010 with a generous donation from the Robert B. Dougherty Foundation, and to form an institute with a mission of water and food security. So we want to have an impact, and certainly on the ground. And we have five main areas of activity that we focus on. And these are related to the strengths of Nebraska, like closing the water and productivity gaps, improving groundwater management, as you will see, is big here in Nebraska, enhancing high productivity irrigated agriculture and agriculture in general, and then looking at the impacts of agriculture on human health and ecosystems, and management of drought, right, which permeates and impacts all the agricultural production. We have more than 120 faculty fellows within the system, global fellows from different places in the world. We work with universities, governments, private enterprise, as you can see here, an example of some of our partners, and this is just a subset, there's more. But, we work with private entities, World Bank, universities, CGIAR system like IMI, USDA here in the US. And so there's a variety of partners that we have, and this allows us to extend our breadth because we're not a very large institute. So we've worked in different parts of the world. As you could see here, this is a little dated because we have signed an agreement with the ministry in Kazakhstan and working in Uzbekistan as well in Central Asia. So through these partnerships, we've extended our breadth to other countries. And Nebraska is a good story to tell. We are a substantial irrigator. We're the #1 irrigated state in the US, more than California, yeah. And on the order of magnitude of other countries like Spain and Egypt, okay? And I keep updating the Brazil irrigated agriculture because Brazil agriculture irrigated is growing at a rate of about 300,000 hectares a year. So every so often I have to add the amount of irrigated agriculture. Most of the Nebraska agriculture comes from groundwater. Okay, you can see the state here and the Ogallala High Plains Aquifer. We're fortunate to have the greatest saturated thickness under the state. But even though there's more than 96,000 wells that are pumping from the aquifer, the irrigation rate has been dropping, and that's because of the strong extension and the fact that there's a lot of education and improvement in irrigation practices. Nebraska is in a transition zone between the semi-arid west, 400 millimeters, to the southeast where almost 900 millimeters falls, right? So you can grow corn in the eastern part of the state without irrigation on a normal year, but across the state, you need a certain different levels of irrigation. And you could see the soil distribution on the top right here, and the whole 1/3 of the area is sand. That's the sand hills, and that's one of the major recharge zones of the aquifer. So if you fly across Nebraska in certain areas, you look down, you'll see thousands, hundreds and thousands of center pivot irrigation systems. And here in this figure here, you'll see the dark blue dots are the wells, okay? And you'll notice that there's a high concentration of pivots along the Platte River and where the soils are very good, right? I showed you the soils here are silty loams and clays that are very good water holding capacity for irrigation. And there was an explosion of center pivot irrigation in the 70s after the invention of the center pivot in the 50s. And that led to a big stress on the aquifer. However, and I'll explain why Nebraska, even though about that explosion of pumping, the aquifer is fairly stable in Nebraska, while in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, they've already pumped sometimes more than 50% of the saturated thickness of the aquifer. So they are doing it not sustainably. Nebraska is doing it sustainably because of the system of governance, okay? Nebraska has a system of local governance of groundwater through the natural resource districts, okay? This was a legislative law that was passed. The natural resource districts are governed by a board of directors that's voted in by the electors of that district. And typically they're farmers and agricultural folks. They understand farming and they create the rules. So if you look here in this picture, you'll see that in the pink areas, there's already a moratorium of no more wells. Okay, they've reached the limit. In the cross-hatched areas, mostly in the west where the semi-arid area is and the recharge is lower, there's limits on pumping, okay? For example, in the Upper Republican Natural Resource District, farmers are only allowed to pump 300 millimeters a year or 1,500 over a 5-year period. So it's like a bank account. All the wells are monitored with flow meters. A lot of them are through telemetry in real time to the NRD that observes if they're following the rules. So because of these rules and different NRDs, the aquifer has been sustainable. But the other part of the equation is monitoring, okay? So there's hundreds of monitoring wells in Nebraska. Some of them are daily, some of them are weekly, some of them are observed on a yearly basis at the end of the winter, right? That gives time for the aquifer to recover over the winter. Remember, Nebraska only irrigates one crop per season from May to September. So then with these wells, the University Division, the Conservation Survey Division could make maps. Okay, so here's a map of the groundwater levels from the beginning of irrigation in Nebraska to the spring of '81. And you could see that in several regions of the state, the aquifer had been decreased by 10 to 15 meters, okay? But with the implementation of those local rules and controls by the NRDs, if you look at now from pre-development to spring 2021, you'll see that the aquifers recovered in most parts of the state, except in the Republican River Basin in this northwest part of the state. So these groundwater governance policies have been very successful in managing hundreds of thousands of wells in Nebraska. So we, as an institute, did an analysis of the water productivity, how well Nebraska is doing on using that water. And water productivity we define in this report as the yield, right? The grain yield, there's no cotton in Nebraska, but it would be the cotton yield if there was. So the grain yield divided by the evapotranspiration, the water consumed, okay? So this is the inverse of the water footprint, the pegada hídrica, right? Water productivity is the inverse, okay? And so we'd used the aquacrop model and a lot of spatial data, soils, crop data layers, and we created maps of water productivity. And we showed in this report that you can download, you can go on our website and download this report, that the water productivity of corn and soybeans over 25 years has almost doubled, okay? That's pretty impressive, right? And the reason is the top part of the equation, the yield has been increasing due to the development of high-producing corn and soybean hybrid varieties, right? That produce more, that are more, you can plant denser in the field for a variety of reasons. And of course, the denominator, the ET, the water consumed, has been going down, as I showed in the previous slide at the beginning of the presentation. So we have maps of the spatial distribution of the water productivity by those NRDs and by the counties in Nebraska. And we also did the analysis for livestock, you know, cattle, swine, chickens, turkeys, milk production. So this is the total output of those production divided by the water consumption. And there you have to take into account not only water consumption by the grain that's being fed to these animals, but by how much they drink and in the production itself. And what we could see is that one of the great contribution is that the feed conversion ratio of these animals is going down. So in other words, it takes less feed for them to produce the same amount of protein or meat, right? This is because of genetics, again, breeding of more efficient animals, and also the size of the animals has been increasing, right? So that's another phenomenon. And if you look at the water productivity, you've heard that the pegada hídrica, the footprint of cattle production is very high. True, right, as you could see here. But you also have to look at it under a different light, right? So if you look at it at the total feed used and the water footprint to produce the total carcass, yes, beef is very low compared to milk and chicken and so forth. But if you look at just the protein content and the energy content of just the product, then beef does very well compared to milk and some of the other, right? So look at our report to see the details and on this. So another product that's relevant that I want to talk about is our GlowDet product, which is our global daily ET product. This we started on the Middle East, North Africa region because we had funding from USAID. Our partners are in NASA, USDA, and the National Drought Mitigation Center here, because this daily ET product was being used for the drought composite index for that region and for drought early warning, because in early warning, the first thing that decreases when precipitation goes down is the evapotranspiration of the crops before you see visually geometric changes in the canopy. So we did a product based on this new satellite from VERS, which has the thermal infrared and the shortwave bands at the same resolution, which is a vast improvement over MODIS. We're running the Alexi, which model by Martha Anderson that has the two-source energy balance. I'm not going to describe it in detail, but we run the energy from the balance of the canopy and the soil separately. And we produce daily evapotranspiration. Like this is 1 day of ET on May 1st in 2015, but you can add up all the daily ET and come up with an integrated over the 8 year. So this is for the 2018 year over the entire region of North Africa, Middle East. And you could see the Nile Delta here, which has a high use of water from surface irrigation and being in the desert, okay? And so this product we are running on a 15 by 15 degree lat long grid scale, and our goal is to run it over all the food producing regions of the world eventually as funding becomes available. We are running it in these grid cells in North America and in Brazil. So in North America, we have other projects and we're using it for irrigation. For irrigation, we need to downscale it from 375 meters to 30 meters using Landsat data. So there's a downscaling process called dyslexia, and we have an open Python version of that. But we've compared the data to eddy covariance towers. This is measuring ET. We've compared it at the 375 meters. The scatter you see is because of the resolution of 375. But we've also run the model in Brazil with partners in Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul and Santa Maria from funding with CAPES and ANA. And we've run it at this tile. Here's some examples from 2018. And we've compared it to towers down there. So this is comparison to a tower in the natural grasslands in southern Brazil, similar to grasslands in the Pampas, right, in northern Argentina and Paraguay. And even at 375, you could see that it did a very good job with low scatter, low mean bias error, and so forth. So this product could be used for drought monitoring. And this is my final part of the presentation. We partner with a drought mitigation center here at UNL, and they've done work all over the world. And they do monitoring and early warning and policy and planning and help local entities prepare for drought, and also the vulnerability and risk assessment of the drought, okay? And their goal is actionable policy and informing the information. They have a global engagement in South America. They've worked with CISA, which some of you know about in these Southern Cone countries, down in Southern Cone, and they've created a drought, composite drought index. They've done the drought monitor in the United States. This is a very important product because it's used by the government for policy, for declaring drought and emergency issues, and farmer insurance for drought. So this product is very important. Here's a recent July 4th monitor, and you could see that Nebraska was in a severe drought this summer. Luckily, a lot of Nebraska is irrigated, so they can cope with it. With that project we had in the Middle East, they did the drought preparedness and index for North Africa. They've monitored, they've created the Monitor de Secas in Brazil, worked in Australia, and so forth. And here's an example of the composite drought index for Latin and South America, Central and South America. No surprise for the countries down in the Southern Cone that you were in a drought this year, earlier on. So that's not surprising, but this product, you can go online and look at it. But this is where the satellite ET product can be enhanced and used locally. Finally, I wanted to just say we represent, we're on the World Water Council Board of Governors, Peter McCormick, the executive director, and I'm the alternate. We're involved heavily in the next World Water Forum organization, which will be in Bali, Indonesia, next May. We've invited IICA to participate in the regional process of the Americas for that forum. And other involvements of us in Central America and the Dominican Republic, we have a partnership with Pontificia Universidad Católica Madre Maestra, Pucamaima, and RCE, and we're working on proposals to the World Bank and IDB for a national irrigation plan, updating the irrigation water database for the country, and design of irrigation canals. And in Brazil, we recently signed an agreement with the government of Mato Grosso to study the groundwater and surface water in that state to develop irrigation sustainably, because they see that by developing irrigation in the existing ag land, that will decrease the pressure on the Cerrado and Amazon ecosystems, which they want to reduce the pressure there. So we're open to partnerships, and with governments and countries. We partner with banks already. So thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you, Christopher, very much. This has been a very impressive presentation regarding the use of science for responsible use of water. It has been very clear how science can help in face of the water crisis and the tools that the university has been using for the recovery of groundwater and the examples that the university has on so perhaps and hopefully we'll have more projects of this nature to take science to such an important subject matter. And I would like to thank Christopher very much for inviting me to the regional forum and the regional meeting of the World Water Forum. We will be taking agriculture to be discussed at the committee meeting. So thank you very much for the invitation. Well, before we move on, I would just like to go over the video of the Minister Valenzuela from Chile that we could not hear. It is 1 minute, 30 seconds, but it is an important message from a very important country regarding water. So let us watch the video of the Minister of Chile. Wearing the water t-shirt, right? We are in Santiago de Chile on the day of the enactment of the water irrigation law. After years of lack of an agreement, we finalized an agreement for the irrigation law, which is resilient, that respects nature, that focuses on the responsible use of water for the accumulation, technification, and transfer. I would like to congratulate you for this dialogue propitiated by IICA within Latin America and the Caribbean, which is fundamental. There, we have had more water, even flooding this year, but we continue to face structural drought. Many areas of great concern, as is the Coquimbo area, and we see the co-responsibility we all have. We continue to work on basin councils. We need to have resilience, and we congratulate IICA through rice and many other species, plant species, has helped us have in this time of adaptation and mitigation.
Bueno, muchas gracias más una vez al ministro Valenzuela de Chile por ter grabado este video en España, pero que hice gestión de participar de este lanzamiento técnico de agua y tener Chile en el lanzamiento realmente es muy importante por la referencia que Chile es en el tema agua. Bueno, seguimos adelante.
Okay, let us move on now. Let us talk now about the progress and challenge for the water transition in agriculture, indicators and guidelines for policies in Latin American and Caribbean countries. Dr. Ryan Quiroga, head of the Water and Energy Unit at the Natural Resource Division of ECLAC. And allow me to once again thank her for the partnership IICA has, ECLAC has with IICA. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Go ahead, please. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, IICA, for the invitation. We are in the process of sharing the presentation. If you give me a second. Yes, we can hear you. Can you put your presentation on full screen? That is exactly what I was trying to do at this time. Just to bear with me a second.
Pero te escuchamos bien. Muchas gracias.
Un segundo, por favor. Mil disculpas. Sí, está. Muchas gracias. Bueno, creo que
Okay,
ahora
thank you very much. I think now you can see it full screen. Yes, yes, we can. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you. What we would like to share with you results from a dialogue, a regional a dialogue regarding water and agriculture. And this is what we as the Natural Resources Division would like to share with you, as well as some recommendations in public policy regarding the transition in the water resource and sustainable and rational use in the agriculture sector is very important for the region. What situation are we in Latin America and the Caribbean? As like we would like to put in context the fact that we are in a new lost decade of economic growth. In the decade that ended in 2023, the average growth in the region has only reached 0.8% a year, as compared to 2% in the most famous decade in the 1980s. So in this decade, due to the pandemic and the crisis due to the war in Ukraine, we have a drop in economic growth. We have gone way down. And this is the context that has led to an increase in poverty, unemployment, and a series of other difficulties that we need to include in public policies to be recommended for the efficient use of water resources. So in this context, during the water dialogues, we have determined that and there are publications available for you. At the end of the presentation, you will see a QR code where you can download all the data. And we have sent this to the IICA Secretariat with fact sheets and all these figures. But the first major challenge is a deficit in water coverage and secure sanitation. Millions of people in the region are affected, a very serious problem. More than 200 million people without water, 400 million without access to safe sanitation. Aside from that, we are very unequal and regarding water access, inadequate and obsolete infrastructure, water stress distributed especially at a subnational scale. We just saw how this is distributed spatially in the presentation by the University of Nebraska. Growing conflict for the alternative use of water, greater impact of climate change, which worsens all of the above, regarding extensive drought, growing pollution of surface water bodies, and low level of wastewater treatment, something we are working on as ECLAC basically in different areas, and efficient sectoral and residential use. Spread out governance among all authorities, and it does not reach the ministerial hierarchy in our countries, as we see throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And lastly, we have insufficient metrics for decision-making purposes and to focus investments. As we have said, we have published statistic evidence of everything we have said regarding the challenges. I would just go quickly over three of them. Water endowment is 4 times greater than the world average. However, spatially and geographically, it is poorly distributed, both in countries as well as subnationally, and in basins and regions and water basins. So this leads to a high water stress in bigger cities and areas of our economic development. The efficiency in water usage in Latin America is less than worldwide, including all countries in the world. And there is no disconnect between water extraction and the production of value added and GDP in the region as a whole over the last 20 years. So going straight into the water challenges of agriculture in our region, we see that, basically the use of more than 70% of the water is for agriculture, particularly for irrigation. And therefore, this is a very important factor that made us join the Hemispheric Water and Agriculture Initiative headed by IICA, because for us, water management is very, very important, particularly for agriculture, and the contribution of agro to the region continues to be very important, particularly 22% of total exports in Latin America and the Caribbean represent 5.5 of the gross domestic product and produces 14% of employment. At the same time, 16% of the agriculture land worldwide, 33% is apt for agriculture, but is not used. And we expect that in order to meet the demand in 2050, agriculture will need to produce almost 50% more food. As the ministers and previous speakers have said, there is no food security without managing the water factors. And this is what guides us to work on the challenges of water management in agriculture, which means increased production, but utilizing the resources in a more efficient manner, reading the environmental footprint, and considering, of course, the impacts of global change, not only from climate, but also biodiversity and the water cycle. So we need sustainable water management of agriculture. For agriculture, we need to adopt new irrigation practices that enable lesser extraction of water and greater efficiency. There are many lessons learned throughout the region and beyond the region that may be of use. A transition to crops that are adapted to climate conditions in agriculture, adjust the extension of irrigation areas to the current and future water availability, managing the demand through focusing on greater productivity, resilience, and circularity, and establish water extraction controls to preserve equal access and meet the priorities established among the different users of water. There is a human right to water, as is set out in the legislations and constitutions of each of the countries in the region. And we also need integrated management, including water and soil and forests, to regulate the water cycle in the basins more effectively. Redesign the governance systems and the management instruments, particularly in this case, we're talking about the authorities of agriculture and water. And it is responsibility of the political and legal authorities to develop the incentives and appropriate oversight in our countries by allocating water prices that foster investment in water efficiency, particularly at the agricultural area, and showing the virtual water exported through agricultural products.
En esta materia, como ya
In this matter, as I was telling you, CEPAL has led the process of the regional dialogues of water in the last 3 years, 21, 22, and 23, where we have participated by practically all of the countries of Latin America. It is a multi-stakeholder approach where we have people from the authorities, from the civil society, from the NGOs, and from the community organizations, the private sector, and with the strategic partners that here we have the demonstration of some of them. We have had a very big registration of participants in our dialogues. The last one, which was here in our house, what we call the house, so we almost had 3,700 registered participants because it was done a hybrid and 250 people face to face. In this last version of the dialogues on water, it is the most essential thing. We were able to build among all of us a regional agenda for action for the water, which is not binding, but being aligned with all the principles and strategies of the previous conferences. Therefore, what it does is unify a series of elements and guidelines, policies that are promoted. And in the part of water for agriculture, in the regional agenda, there are four central ideas that are promoted from our region to promote the integrated management of water, the soil, the energies, and its relationship with the ecosystems in a systemic manner, to innovate in the adequate of the coordination, multi-sectorial coordination instances in participative processes, to protect and restore fundamental ecosystems for preserving the cycle of water as we know it, for the electric generation, for the food security and nutrition, and also, finally, to recover the ancestry practices for the production of waters that make it sustainable. Next year, and with this, we're going to be wrapping up this presentation. We will have the new version of the regional dialogues on water, the 2024, that is foreseen for the third week of March, and everybody is more than invited to participate with us. It's going to be carried out in Panama in a presential meeting, and we will have a special session for water and agriculture to present the technical alternatives of water that is being generated by the IICA. We also want to make a very detailed job for theme approach to be able to have a position for the next forum of water that is going to be carried out in 2024. And we will also have a particular in the transbordering waters and its integral management. The participants in this, as I said, are ministry authorities related to water, secretariats of water of Latin America and the Caribbean, representatives of the private sector, of the academia, and the whole group, the regional group of experts that is made up by the main agencies, funds and programs, and the Bank for Development that might help and participate somehow with water in the region. The result that we expect out of these dialogues is to continue on with the promotion of the regional agenda that we have put together and that we have also sent to the Secretary of the ICA to have it sent to all of you, both in Spanish as well as in English, to verify the advancements of this agenda that have been achieved in this year and to generate new commitments with each and every one of us. Here we have the QR code where you can visit the website. You have the website where you can download all the official documentation, and we are more than happy to continue on collaborating in this matter. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you, Dr. Rayen. Thank you for the invitation also for us to participate in the dialogue on water. Certainly, the next year in Panama, we are going to have an excellent section that is specific to water and agriculture. I believe that the presentation of Dr. Rayen is extremely clear regarding the numbers and the challenges that the agriculture sector has to increase the production 50% with the use of resources that is more efficient. That is a very, very big challenge, and that is why we all have to work together and to that efficiency in the production of food and in the use of water through the sustainable management of water. And now we want to continue on with 250 participants in our forum. We have almost reached 300 through social networks. We see the importance the importance of this topic, discussing the importance of water and agriculture. And we're going on to the last panel. The last panel is also very important, which is a topic related to financing, innovative financing of water for agriculture in the country. And for that, we're going to have the participation of the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the CAP. And we're going to begin with the CAP, with Franz Rojas, who is the Director of Water and Safety, so that he can present his presentation in 10 minutes. So thank you, Frank. The floor is all yours. Can you see my screen? Yes, sir, we can see it. Can you put it in full screen mode, please? There it is. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Don Otero and to you, Fernando, for the invitation. I'm going to bind myself to the 10 minutes that I have been given. So I'm going to talk about these four topics very briefly. And I think that we have, it has been stated by many of the colleagues as well as the ministers and those people that have spoken before me, but I would like to point out that for CAF, it is very important to understand that in the context of the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, there are two types of risks. the family risk, the small scale, and the intensive scale that happens to our producer in the region of Latin America. Therefore, they require an approach from financial points of view that are somewhat distinctive from that of the region offers. That is very interesting.
Nuestras estimaciones basadas en la encuesta de la FAO son que aproximadamente se riegan unas 28 millones de hectáreas, sin embargo el potencial es de casi 100 millones de hectáreas en la región, y así lo vemos cuando vemos los planes de agricultura de los diferentes países, donde vemos que los aprovechamientos hablan entre a veces 1%, o en algunos casos 6, 8%, o mejor de los escenarios, un 10-12% de la superficie potencial. Por lo tanto, creemos que hay una oportunidad muy importante, y recogiendo lo que ustedes dicen, que nosotros plenamente coincidimos: sin agua no hay agricultura, y si no hay agricultura no hay seguridad alimentaria y no hay desarrollo agrícola, y por lo tanto tampoco puede hablarse de un desarrollo rural si no hay un desarrollo agrícola como tal. Y por lo tanto coincidimos en que es importante el riego agrícola y la agricultura en general a los PIB de los países, y además concentra, y esa es también otra característica de nuestra región, una alta fuerza laboral. En algunos países inclusive estamos hablando que 70% de las personas que viven en el ámbito rural se dedican a la agricultura. Entonces, sin duda, es importante. Y en este contexto, permítame señalar que CAF ha comprometido hace poco en la Conferencia Mundial de Naciones Unidas, que se celebró en marzo de este año, una inversión para la seguridad hídrica de $4.000 millones para 2023-2026. Es decir, estamos hablando de $1.000 millones en promedio al año, que incluye, por supuesto, proyectos de riego, además de los de agua potable y saneamiento. Pero esto es importante porque significa una contribución que exige un aumento de más del 60% de nuestro promedio histórico de aprobaciones en inversiones de agua que se han dado, y eso porque entendemos de que la región presenta los rezagos que ya lo han mencionado, y por lo tanto es una manera de contribuir a alcanzar los ODS, en este caso no solo el ODS 6, sino también el ODS 2 y otros que están relacionados con el agua. Ahora, entrando ya en materia de este panel como tal, nosotros yo quisiera distinguir lo que son los préstamos con garantía soberana, es decir, estamos hablando de aquellos préstamos que se otorgan por las multilaterales, por ejemplo, con la garantía del gobierno del país, ¿no? La garantía soberana que se otorga. Y ahí tenemos obviamente los esquemas tradicionales, pero que van a seguir dándose, como son los préstamos para proyectos, ¿no? Los PPIs, como llamamos en CAF, y que están asociados a un proyecto específico, con unas metas específicas, y que se hacen las evaluaciones correspondientes para hacer todos los desembolsos según los avances programados y las inversiones requeridas. Y también están las líneas de crédito, que estas líneas de crédito fungen solamente como apoyo en términos de proyectos, también pueden ser como apoyo en términos de liquidez u otras, o incluso para apalancar algunas situaciones de emergencia. Pero ahora quisiera destacar que estamos trabajando en CAF en algunos países en lo que llamamos el programa por resultados. Este es un poco distintivo al proyecto tradicional porque no se enfoca a los proyectos en sí, sino a apoyar programas que ya están implementados o planteados en los diferentes países. Entonces, por lo tanto, lo que buscan este financiamiento es apoyar a programas que ya tienen los países, y obviamente incluir dentro de este financiamiento el apoyo al fortalecimiento de capacidades institucionales, al fortalecimiento de los sistemas de procura. Pero lo que es interesante y distintivo es que se desembolsa en función a resultados específicos, fijados como hitos. Es decir, no hay una correlación directa de la inversión que ha hecho el país respecto al desembolso, sino es en función a hitos que se discuten y se acuerdan con los diferentes países. En el caso de riego, por ejemplo, podrían ser hectáreas equipadas o hectáreas...
In the case of irrigation, these could be areas that have been prepared for this. And in this case, CAF or other multilaterals, as have been doing would be making the disbursements based on the compliance milestones. And this, if they support the programs, will foster greater ownership by the government and the relationship we have. We are about to implement this in several countries, some countries where it is important to highlight this, because this is a response to the projects. Now, I would like to highlight that within CAF, we are examining the new trends, for example, the loans, the pay for access projects. Although in the water area, there are already projects related to matters like for the reduction of water, drinking water loss. There is a big potential to apply this in other areas. These have the characteristic that there is an interval of trust in a credit, the interest rates, terms, and through some models, they could examine the intervals in which these conditions are occurring. But if the country exceeds these goals and reduces losses more than foreseen or reduces flooding in urban drainage, well, very likely this could be rewarded with a reduction in the rate. And in the opposite case, if they do not comply within the interval, there could be some penalty. These are the sustainability loans or the environmental impact loans are gaining great importance within the financing market and is evolving from bonds towards these products related to sustainability. So in CAF, we are also carrying out some studies to see how to comply with this and related to encouraging the success and yield and performance of these receiving the loans. We should talk about blended finance, where multilaterals have a very important role because we understand that in the financial resources needed to meet with all the SDGs 6 and require not only the support of multilaterals, but also to attract new actors. That is, we are seeing this very currently for drinking water, and the blended financing continues to use this. What is this blended finance all about? These are catalysts to attract new actors. The fundamental characteristic here is to attract more resources. So that is why we have this blended, this combination of financing for development that could come from multilaterals or from climate funds, NGOs, governments, or philanthropic groups in the form of credits or subsidies, and that will mobilize commercial financing that could exist in at different levels in commercial banks. So here it is important to highlight this. So we are leading a coalition with many multilateral banks. There are more than 60 public banks between multinational and national that we call the Final Finance Coalition, where we want to attract public national banks to join this crusade in favor of water. We see that the different banks are investing and they do this in the project. So we see there's a big potential here. But for this, we need to reduce the risks and better understand what the water sector is doing. So that is part of the philosophy we are working with. This combined or blended finance, could be concrete subsidies and concessions, and basically this will help by reducing the cost of capital and perhaps instead provide technical assistance or as a guarantee to reduce risks. So We are providing guarantees so that the public bank can reduce its rate to a level that will reduce risk of exposure or could be for subsidies related to non-reimbursable funds for the preparation of projects. So this is another interesting scheme that we are starting to work with together hand in hand with the private sector. And I would like to end my comments regarding parametric insurance because we understand, and Manuel Otero mentioned this at the beginning, we are living a very significant drought in our countries, and we see that at the end of the year we will have El Nino, and when we have El Nino, and we forecast this will be between strong and very strong, very likely the countries will see an intensification of drought and even flooding.
So with some of the countries, we have started to analyze this matter of the parametric insurances, and we have started to support these in the Caribbean zone. What they're looking for is to look for a coverage in a forecasted event. What these events are looking for is not to compensate the magnitude of the damage, but to get advanced in the estimating the magnitude of the event. If it's going to be grade 6 or grade 5 in the Richter scale, like in an earthquake, but it could be like in the case of the droughts, is measured through an index of humidity of the soil or based on index of floodings, the volume of water that is precipitated into the basin. And this is something that has taken place in some of the countries and some of the regions. It seems to us very interesting, for example, to be able to go deeper and to analyze. We are still not doing this, we are not applying it, but there is the potential for that because the regions are supporting this, and this is something that would allow us to do a quick analysis or relief to the country when we know that some of the great areas of our region is the capacity for some of the risks that the region has is the capacity to respond. So it's this alternatives to be able to contribute decisively to attend to these partners, these situations of the climate like droughts and floodings. This is what I wanted to share with you, and I take this opportunity to send you a warm greeting and to be attentive to any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Franz, for this excellent presentation. And I believe that this is a very important road that we're going to have, which is precisely the innovation in the financing, the different models, because it's going to be necessary to have a lot of financing to be able to face what we are talking about with a matter related to water. So thank you very much. And I believe that it's very important to listen from the CAF, what they're doing, and as well as from the other multilaterals. And I take this opportunity to go on to the World Bank, to Mr. Luis Nicolás Reyola, who is a specialist in drainage, who is going to talk about this topic through the point of view of the World Bank. So, Luis, thank you very much. The floor is yours. There you are, but we can't hear you. Are you listening to me now? Yes? Yes, now we are. Thank you. And you're looking at the presentation, right? Sir, yes, sir. Okay, perfect. Fernando, thank you very much. Thanks to the IICA for giving us this space and this opportunity so that from the World Bank, we might be able to talk and exchange some experiences and ideas regarding this key issue that has to do with the financing for the issue related to water. My presentation somehow is going to be very complementary to what has been recently presented by friends, in the sense that it is focused on the different instruments that the bank has to support this type of things. And I'm going to center and plan some specific items, taking off from the context of the matter related to financing, some key lessons learned related to different contexts and scale for the type of investments. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming challenges. So if we had to take off from how nowadays, what are the instruments? How are the issues related to water and irrigation and finance in the region? Well, we have different channels to say it somehow. One is the public sector programs. A characteristic in the region is that there are not really that many programs that have a sustainability in time and an institutionalized long-term process. In our region, we do have the law for the promotion in Chile. It's an instrument that regarding the topic of irrigation. It's a good example in that sense.
Y son algunos de los temas que en los marcos de colaboración de las entidades financieras tenemos que analizar, ver cómo
And it's one of the things that in the matter of the framework, financial framework, we have to see how we can strengthen these type of issues. And then we have the commercial loans, which, as we know, have some difficulties of access, especially for some of the small and mid-sized producers. And then we have the matters related to direct donations, subsidies of donors, and then we have another issue that is a key issue that is something that has been tried, that we have tried to strengthen, and it's the link that is we have said between the different uh, presentations, the link between the different stakeholders. And then the programs of projects, as we have been mentioning, in line with what Frank was talking about the sovereign loans. It's a way of being able to link some innovative loans related to this, knowing that at this moment the challenge that we have in the region is that we're starting off from a very limited financing in the national case, like in the private case, with the private entities also, there is not, in many of the cases, it is not supported by sustainability of the investment, but they are linking some initiatives, some projects, in some of the cases with a very limited access. Just that it leaves out some of the producers that are key within our region regarding the small producers to be able to adopt this type of technology, both from the point of view, as it has been mentioned, in the matter related to resiliency, as well as the food safety and the sustainability of the project. And one of the most important topics is precisely that these instruments that, due to the risk of the agricultural business in many of the cases and the difficulty for the access to credit, they generate high rates, because sometimes there is a limited access because of matters of guarantees and access to the credit to the small producers. The other issue also is, and it has been mentioned here very clearly, it was mentioned by the presentation of CEPAL, are the restrictions, the macro credit restrictions, the fiscal spaces that are somewhat complicated as to how to propose the investment proposals in this matters related to water. And I'm going to comment some of the aspects that is centering myself on some of the successful examples that the bank has had in other regions, but particularly in our region. In the case of Kenya, for example, taking off from these limitations that I was just talking about regarding the lack of access to credit lines, the difficulty, especially for the capacities of the small producers, that even though they know that irrigation is a very positive element for their productivity, they do not have the knowledge to be able to access those credits and the adoption of that technology, and especially in remote actions, where, for example, in this project of Kenya, the articulation that has been sought in this project is precisely to link the final producer of the adoption of technology, who are the producers, and through them, the nexus with the private sector that has to do with the financial institution that through the private bank, the AFC of the bank, generates instruments of guarantee for this type of institutions, and among which we have an added value instrument for adding value, which takes the instrument for the producers and makes the payment for the producers and the credit line based on the added value of the production that has been won by the application of technology in particular. And I mentioned this as an annex, as an articulation of different stakeholders, which is a key aspect, so that based on certain experiences that we had with very good results, to generate an implementation on a greater scale in the case of Kenya. In the same way, in India, there were many projects that were linked to this case, to the matter of subsidy, where we also had generation of technologies by some small producers, but in many of the cases, the sustainability was a little more committed. So what was sought for in this sense was what is called the non-banking and financial institutions, in the sense that they are small institutions, financial institutions, generated through a participation or an agreement with a partner, a private technical partner, and it generates the possibility of the dissemination of the project, the preparation, and the technical assistance to the small producers are the ones that receive these small microcredits, and in some of the cases are aimed at drip irrigation, and for the creation of reservoirs and other type of infrastructure. And with this articulation at another scale of the link between the private sector and more producers, and it's a topic that is very important to guarantee the scale and the sustainability. And going on to the case of Latin America, there are different models with different shades, because what is important to mention here, and I think that Manuel was mentioning at the beginning, is one of our DACA solutions. In other words, this
cada situación de cada país. Pero el modelo de alianzas productivas, donde básicamente la clave de esto es este triángulo de los vértices, este triángulo donde está el sector público que financia a través de los proyectos y los programas, están los productores que organizados son los que reciben los beneficios de la técnica, y está el vínculo con el comprador. Y la institución financiera privada, la banca, que es la que genera crédito para implementar el plan de negocio que se establezca para esta organización de productores, que el sector público a través de los programas lo apalanca, pero que tiene un nexo que le da la sostenibilidad de vínculo con el mercado para el comprador, lo cual disminuye los riesgos y genera el círculo virtuoso en términos de la sostenibilidad. Proyectos de este tipo, el Banco Mundial tiene muchos muy exitosos, muchos que con un enfoque también en temas de agua muy importante, con varios estados de Brasil. En Bolivia es un caso muy interesante, el proyecto de Alianzas Rurales, que evolucionó de temas relacionados más de fomento productivo clásico y un crecimiento, una maduración del programa para que garantizar la sostenibilidad tuviera un foco en temas de agua y de riego, que son las
issues
últimas.
related to water and irrigation, and these are the last actions that have been executed, because this is a matter that is a key issue for the sustainability of the investments that is done. In the same way it is being implemented in Argentina, in Honduras, so very iconic also. In the particular case of the Dominican Republic, now we are making a pilot, and we are using it as a model for the technification of rice, or the logic for the technification of rice. It's an alternate irrigation model. It's an investment that does not follow the individual logic, but it has to have a logic, clustered logic, so that it might generate the benefits that are sought for the generation of water, the reduction of input, and the reduction of contaminants, and the greatest profitability and yield for the productive models, and also for the production of methane, which is something that is done through the scale financing that generates bonds related to the green bonds or the carbon sequestration bonds, and this is the mechanism that is used. Another model, the other models that have been implemented within these models, the program, sorry, with financing with sovereign debt, is what we call grants. Different to the classic model of this productive alliance, what we're looking for is for the individual producers or associated producers to have different windows depending on the characteristics of the scale of the producers, that might be able to access a scheme in which the program provides a subsidy to be able to implement certain technologies. The participation in the program and the link with the financial institutions, private institutions, local bank, credit unions, rural banks, as they are called in some of the countries, reduce the risk of the participation in the financing. And in face of the implementation, the producer or the organization is going to receive a certain subsidy, depending on if it's individual, the scale, or associative, dependent on the different types of association. The same way in project in Argentina, we are non-reimbursable grants or contributions. That is very much associated to the plan for access to water, as well as other type of activities that are related to some sort of a rural livelihood, and that it's also supporting in the scheme related to the fact that it is investment financing and technical assistance that link with the market. I cannot stop because of time and many of the details of the particular characteristics of the project. These investment programs are projects at a greater scale, like, for example, the sovereign credits that were mentioned by friends. But there is a particular characteristic that is designed and implemented and financed according to the countries. It has a lot to do with investments that are required in infrastructure to be able to make it possible for the irrigation of the plots, but also the issue related to the strengthening of the institutions, of the technical assistance, the governance, and at the same time to link these matters nexus for the financing with the investments in the parcels. Well, these are some of the landmarks where some of them are more focused on food security, others on rehabilitation. We know that the public irrigation in many of the countries, it has happened that it falls into a non-virtuous circle in the sense that if there is not an adequate operation and maintenance, the deterioration of systems, the quality is going to be inefficient, and the rendering of services is not going to be good. And this has a circle that is negative in the sense that there is low recovery of costs and there is a deterioration, progressive deterioration of the system. So one of the challenges that has been proposed here is to advance the logic for the credits for modernization, where what the investment has to be aimed at key aspects that are related to fundamentally the reduction of the cost of operation and maintenance, and that might be linked and make it possible the diversification, the adoption of technology, and with that, the sustainability of the systems itself, so that we can abandon or reduce the subsidies that are required from the public sector. Another aspect, finally, at a little greater scale, that has to do with public-private participation, is the challenge of these projects, where, as France was also saying in his presentation, that there is a great potential to expand in these topics and to generate areas where this type of instruments it might be a key issue to guarantee that the public funds are the ones that are going to leverage the system and that the private sector, be it constructors, designers, or the producers or financiers themselves, might generate the link to make the project feasible when there are many investments involved. And the challenge of this is to establish what are the risks, the roles that each one of the stakeholders have involved in this regulatory framework and the institutional aspects. So this is a key example that the bank in Argentina has supported itself on to for the implementation of some models, and the same thing has happened in Brazil. And this is the lessons learned. And to close, that this is an instrument that is very interesting, and many times we see and we see that it's very interesting to propose it because it attracts the financing. But up to this moment, the experience of the bank in Marrakesh has been successful, but some of them that have had greater problems have been Ethiopia or in Kenya. It adapts more to the schemes, basically aimed at more modern schemes with a more agro-industrial production, taking into account that the sector of the irrigation, when we're talking about this and analyzing this, the irrigation is something that is very sensitive because many times there is sometimes a resilience because of the use of the involvement of a private enterprise in terms of financing in the use of the natural resources. So, a key issue in these design issues is that we have to guarantee that for sustainability, that there have to be rules for operations that might be linked to those that guarantee the sustainability, and that many times are associated to the that was the experience from Marrakesh to the alternative, like in the case of Olmo in Peru, that we've had the experience of this. The topic is that we have to guarantee that the guarantee of the demand is in this sense. The PPP, both in drinking water and roads and so forth, have been models that have been very successful, but a little more riskful. And if we have to finalize, what are the challenges of all these instruments? Well, we know that one of the key issues and to make these goals possible, or the strategic axis of the initiative that have to do with increasing the productivity and the storage, the efficiency and the use of water, and the schemes of governance, it is to try to generate through the programs and proposals a better access to the credit, to simplify in the case of small and medium-sized producers, that feasibility of access, and some of them with a good result that we have commented here in the presentation, but that there's much documentation regarding this, and to generate documents that will guarantee the involvement and that guarantees the sustainability of the investor and the private producer. So the challenge is to strengthen the cooperation between the governments, the partners, and this platform is a perfect space to be able to begin with these discussions and to take on the challenges that are being proposed in each one of the contexts, to be able to generate in the framework of these sovereign projects, the programs of investment, or as well as in other instruments based on results, success-based results that France was also mentioning, in which those in which in the countries they don't need that much support to generate in the proposal of the implementation, but that they have an established program like the financial instance of the bank and come and do a recognition to the state because of certain indicators or result of the proposal. So these are topics that are both at the small scale level, the involvement of the gap and the deficit that we have for the smaller is like the more macro that finance these key issues that have to do with investments in infrastructure, efficiency of the water, governance, and so forth. We have to establish to the future. And with that, once again, thank you for the presentation, and we are at your disposition for any questions that you might have for this dialogue to continue on, and that we might begin in a very good.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luis.
Aquí el último.
Allow me to highlight the last slide with the challenges. When institutions list their challenges, well, each one of us has our own challenges. And when we put these all together, this serves as a matrix, a whole system, a template that can help us all. And I believe this has been very interesting. Thank you. Okay, now we are headed towards the end of our meeting. We are a bit behind schedule. Not too much. I left the IDB as the last speaker in this panel because I know that they will be talking about water fund, another very interesting subject matter that is under development. And so I offer the floor to Lucio Javier Garcia, Financial Special of the Water and Sanitation Division at IDB, and Paula Roberts, Specialist in Infrastructure Energy Center of the Water and Sanitation Division of IDB. And we thank them very much for their participation. So go ahead, Lucio. Hello, good morning. Can you hear me clearly? Yes, we do. Thank you. Can you see the presentation too? Yes, we can. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, IICA, for the invitation. Our presentation will be divided in two parts. I will speak briefly about the innovative financing framework. A good part of what I was going to say has already been mentioned by Franz and Luis, so I will be very brief and offer the floor to Paula Roberts, who will give us an innovative plan for the sector. Our colleague from MECLAC has mentioned that with the SDGs, by including this in water, the challenge is even greater because this, aside from access must be safe, including quality variables. So in the region, there are more than 200 million people that lack safe water, according to the SDG 6 definition. And this represents an additional challenge to meet SDGs by 2030. According to our estimates, reach the SDGs in water and sanitation will require a fivefold investment that has currently underway. And innovation plays an important role here. Innovation will help us do things in less time and with greater returns. In any entity, public water entity, there are operating costs, maintenance costs, pay interest, they have investment needs. Basically, they charge fees and they receive funds from transfers. There is a gap in financing. There are traditional methods as commercial banking, sovereign loans from multilaterals available. But over the last few years, the water sector has been developing innovative financing methods that can leverage many resources, and that we believe multilaterals, IICA, World Bank, and IDB can help in this development and to supplement the traditional methods. Some of these Franz and Luis have already mentioned. The theme bonds, those have been the revolving funds and water funds, as my colleague Paula Roberts will present in greater detail. Thematic bonds, well, these have been strongly developed in financial markets. The water sector is green and social by nature, so therefore social and green funds of bonds fit very well in this sector. These bonds are set in some characteristics I will not cover in detail. You can see these in publications if you want to elaborate on these matters. But the characteristic is in a methodology consider what a green fund or a social bond is, and there are climate resilience bonds underway, and there's a methodology to label something as a green bond, and multilateral banks can help private and public banks, and we believe there's a big potential in the sector. Less than 9% of the emission of green funds are for the water sector, and this because this sector is in itself green. Some of the benefits of these innovative themes, well, this comes from benefits from the financial side as well as from diversifying the base of investors that allows to align the investment strategies with this social sustainability guidelines, and we want greater visibility to get more funding in the future. We have seen that the water sector fits very well in this type of results-based financing. We should focus more on results and bring flexibility and align incentives on both sides. There are activities like repairing leaks, homes with access to potable water, the total water volume treating. These could be indicators to create results-based financing focused on these results being measurable and attainable. I have shared a publication recently produced that defined the steps and gives some practical examples. Here I share some of the publications recently made on for the water sector, the green bonds, results-based financing. This we will share with the IICA colleagues so that they can share with you, and they are in the publications part of IICA of IDB's website. These are very good, innovative instruments. So without further ado, I will offer the floor to Paula Roberts, who will give us an innovative public-private partnership system based on which has nature-based solutions. Go ahead, Paula. Thank you, Lucio. Allow me to share my screen. Confirm if you can see it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I would like to also join in. Thank you for the invitation. I would try to be brief. I know we are getting to the end of the day. The idea is to present what the water funds are, how these work, what the bank strategy is in this area. So, the water funds are part of the water security strategy for Latin America and the Caribbean. We talk about not water resources, but water security. We had 3 lines of action: water and agriculture. This is very relevant. And here we work on multi-sectoral planning, where not only are we examining the relationship between water and food, but also energy, and particularly hydropower. This publication I will also share with the IICA so that they can pass this on to those that may be interested. In the strategic IDB framework to date, we have funds, about 20 million funds leveraged for the development of different programs. We have partners and foreign donors like the International Initiative for Climate in Germany, which particularly basically contribute to the operations we have regarding water funds. We also have another type of program within the framework of the strategy. For example, the Nexus case study And we have the development of water security plans for drought management, and very active is the cross-boundary water program now. Allow me to take advantage of the opportunity to tell you that we have a funding window called Regional Public Assets. The Water Division won the call last year, a project $650,000 for the trinational water basin of the Rio Lempa, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And this is very closely related to water and agriculture. We have to work on value chains for better and more efficiently use water resources and more climate resilient. This is a window that has annual calls. So this year we will work on the green initiative for the La Plata River Basin. I share here the link with you. So if you want to see more information, now going into the water funds, the water security concept is not only ensure quality and quantity, but it is also to support our economic activities and ecosystem services and productive systems. And these lines of water funds are a model that the bank has been applying now for 11 years as part of the Latin American Water Fund Alliance. This Latin American Alliance has partners aside from GEF, the Nature Conservancy, Fundación FENSA, representing the private sector and making available resources for these models, and the bank itself. The water funds are structures, are organizations that are designed as governance and financial mechanisms. And the objective is to ensure water security and stressed water basins that are usually for urban supply. The means to assure water for the areas is to have nature-based solutions, looking at ecosystem-based approaches. So water funds, each water fund is very different. There are 26 operations in the region currently, but they have certain components where everybody works. They try to include in water governance. They convene different actors. The water fund boards, for example, have representatives on the water boards from the private sector. In some case, there are breweries, the wine industry, the public sector. As to governance, this is a multi-stakeholder platform. They generate a scientific evidence to expand knowledge. We have worked closely here with the return on investment studies for nature-based solutions and promote green funding. There's a shared and actionable water security vision based on results, good communication, workshops, training events, among others. They foster and implement nature-based solutions. I will show you some examples in a moment. They facilitate efficient investment in projects because they have shown that it is profitable to have this type of project in basins. So the business case for the water funds is using a basin, for example, an urban basin. As example, we connect the upper basin with the lower basin through by strengthening ecosystem systems and studying rates to determine the payment system. This is a way to connect all users in the basin, not only the urban part, but also productive activities that can occur. I'm not going to repeat this, but it is very important to have the restoration and protection and preparation for natural disasters. So all of those are very important. Green infrastructure, what water funds promote is basically the incorporation of this type of infrastructure, showing it can be cost effective, that it can be designed to be resilient to climate change, and particularly attract green financing, providing other benefits also. The typical waterfront structure, well, there's a technical secretariat aside from the board. I mentioned the bank has been supporting with several significant resources and technical cooperation to provide technical assistance or technical secretariat of the boards, providing equipment, providing advice, etc. To tell you a bit what the map of water funds is all about, there are 26 created or in operation. More than 1,000 hectares have been restored, protected. It is important that we have not only had funding from members of the Alliance, but we have involved more than 300 local partners. We have influenced public policy, particularly in Brazil. There's a lot of work in this sense, and we have utilized leveraged investments from particularly the private sector. Now let me tell you a bit the type of nature-based solutions that apply to water funds. Most of these though this is historical data ever since the creation of the Alliance, but they focus on protecting land. And working with the producers is very important here because we sign conservation agreements. For example, revegetation is another, reforestation is another area of important work. And now in ending, allow me to share you these three examples. The Paute River Basin, the water fund in Ecuador, working with producers. We have hydroponic projects and bee projects through subgrants. And the water fund in Sao Paulo is a very important in Florianopolis, where they have restored hundreds of hectares in the basin and the upper basin of the Mendoza River, working on conservation. They worked very hard in the elimination of exotic species and conservation of the upper basin of the Mendoza River. So here we have the connection between water and agriculture in Mendoza, which is so important. These are examples then of activities coming from the water fund. There are many other activities. As I mentioned, we work very much on strengthening basin governance and training activities, particularly for the different actors. I leave you with my email address if you have any other questions, and if you want further information on any particular fund, I am available. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paula. Very interesting. And I believe the countries will be very interested in water funds. This is going to be very necessary in the future to manage basins and to invest in basins so that this can truly be discussed and seek the best path. This is an area where there is already work done. The first steps, many steps have been taken, and it will be of great help in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of the technical launch. We went over 25 minutes from the time foreseen, but because of the importance of the technical information we have received from all these important partners with so much information, which is very relevant, I think it has certainly been worthwhile. Our proposal now is to create a country room, and this will be done through a specific link for those that may want to, for you to enter the country room. Here in the chat, we are giving you the Zoom address to respond to questions. This is for the IICA technicians that will be moderating the country rooms. Enter this address, select your country, for example, Brazil, and here we will have a room to listen to basically two things. First, the reaction of the launch and the importance it has for your country. And the second question is the opportunities for technical cooperation that we can build in the agro. This should not take you more than half an hour, but it will be very important for us to have a reaction of the technical experts and of the countries too. So thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. We end this session with more than 200 participants. This shows the importance of the subject matter and that we have so much to do regarding water and agriculture. We will see you very, very soon. Do a good job in the country rooms. Thank you all very much.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.